So one of the terms that has been thrown about is, that we've gone through this media apocalypse and now we are maybe going into a new phase. So if you could tell me, maybe starting with you, Katya, from your perspective, are we already in the post-apocalypse, as it seems to be in Slovakia, or are we still in the middle of it?
Well, I think we're in a phase when the whole world is reconsidering the role of the media and actually the sustainability of the media, and realizing that actually the role of the media is pretty unique. And it seems kind of obvious because it's the institution that is designed to inform people. And only this institution is sort of delegated this power and only this power. So everything else comes secondary. Everything else is just a way of doing it. So the way of doing it now has to change since the models, like you said, have all collapsed. And we need to reinvent the media. And that is the sense that I'm hearing and seeing from a lot of people, think tanks, governments, media themselves in the whole world. So we're not in the post-apocalypse era yet, but we're sort of in the era of processing the new reality. And I think in light of the election meddling, everything that's happening around social media, it becomes even more stark, this need for the media and to actually reinvent it.
I think a lot of important elements there. I think the social media aspect is very critical, and let's get to that one too. But just for context, I think it's also Hromadske itself is quite an innovative take on media. It's owned by the journalists themselves. Yes, is that the?
Yes, our media organization. We are an NGO. We were set up in 2013 by a group of journalists, and we are run by journalists. I'm also a journalist by background. It's a membership organization, so members are also journalists, and we are about 170 people right now, and we do have a sort of multimedia approach from the very start. We operate a cable TV channel now, as well as very robust social media platforms, and of course a website.
Okay. And Julien, if you could say a little bit about Mediaquest and where do you see that, in the Middle East? Where are you on that transition? Is it still apocalyptic, or is it transitioning to post-apocalyptic?
Bloodbath.
Okay.
It's very complicated in the sense that I think depending on the area of the world you're talking about, every area is at a complete different stage. And the outcome might end up being dramatic in certain part of the world because, again, of the entry of the completely unregulated tech player. And I know you're going to be talking later about it and would be happy to share to a certain extent what has been going on in the region of the world. Now, I'll tell you a story, and I'll tell a story because it's quite important to rebound on what Tomas has been talking about. A story of something that we did a while back. It's called The Ice That Never Melts. It's quite a good title. Let me tell you the story. A few years ago, I got to my desk, and on my desk, there is this release of a company that is establishing itself in Dubai, and that's going to be producing ice that doesn't melt. That you can put this block of ice under the sun for a month and it doesn't melt. So I read this press release, I'm like, this is bullshit. This is fake news. And that was like a while back. It's probably 10 years ago. I'm like, who the hell has put this on my desk? And I called my PA, she said, oh, it's the team of Communicate. Communicate is one of our titles that we focus on B2B, marketing, advertising, that we do with Advertising Age in the US. So I called the editor-in-chief and told him, what the hell is this? So he tells me what he has in mind. And I'm looking at him, I'm like, you know what? Let's go for it. We're not going to be making a lot of friends, but let's go for it. What did the team do? They took this press release that sounds insane. Any person that would read this would be like, this is bullshit. and they send it to our fellow media institution in the region to see how many of the media are gonna be using it as is. And the rule was simple. Any colleague that calls and challenge, we put him in the loop and tell him what we're doing. And we had this press release published in print newspaper, in websites. The eyes that never met this company, groundbreaking, without doing their background check on looking on if this was bullshit or not. So, to respond to your first question, bad media is dead, yes. Good media that does its work, that look into trust, that trust the information, and in an age where we're going with deep fake into even more insane things that are gonna coming out. I'm sure you're aware of deepfake that basically can produce complete fake news, fake videos where you see a person that is talking about something that is completely insane. So no, the role of journalists, the role of good media is gonna be growing. And there has been a study, I think it was Edelman that has published it a few months ago, that look at the trust between journalists and platforms. And you see two curves. The curve of the platform, that trust in platform had been rising and trust in journalism had been tanking down. And then about a year and a half ago, you see those two curves crossing back out with journalists and the trust in journalists going back up and the trust in the platform going way down.
So I think what you're saying is very important. There is, we all sort of inherently understand that there is a huge value in quality news. How do you make consumers understand that?
Do consumer, everyone, and again, I'm going to be a little bit controversial, but do the majority of the consumer want quality news? I beg to differ. I think we have entered a world that is extremely polarized, where you have a majority of persons that want to hear what makes them feel good, and even if it's complete bullshit. And you have some people that are still looking. So consumer is tricky. I mean, you have some of the consumer that are very happy with the current state. And I do have a trick in looking sometimes at what the future has in stock for the industry. And this is a completely dysfunctional country in the world that is called Lebanon. I don't know how many of you have been to Lebanon. Raise your hand. Okay. Fantastic. It's a lovely country. I was born there, but it's one of the most dysfunctional country around the planet. And when you see the trend that goes into this country, it gives you a hint of what's going on and what's going to happen around the world. For instance, by the late 90s, before even piracy on the music industry had started at big scale, you've seen the music industry that was completely devastated in that country. And the only way artists were making money was not on producing the tapes and the CDs at the time, but producing the events, producing the concert. And this had been the shift of the business model, and that was quite ahead of whatever has happened in the rest of the world. Now, if you look at what's going on in the media scene in Lebanon, you see that there has been over the years an emergence of completely polarized media. So I was speaking with a friend a few years back, and he told me, I told him, how do you get a sense of what's going on? He told me, well, I look at the 6 big news channels because each of them is going to be giving only a fraction of what's going on. And it's for me to put together all those bits and pieces. But again, it's so polarized that someone that is reading X will die saying that X is right and that whatever you're going to be showing, even if you're showing a proof, is fake and that you're trying to convince him or her otherwise. So it's going to be taking time. I think that there is a minority of people that are trying to get back to objectivity, but a majority are still going on in being very happy to having a very partial, very subjective type of news or whatsoever.
And Katya, out of curiosity, I think the other country that is, as you mentioned, on the on the leading edge of let's say interesting challenges, right? Is of course Ukraine, and I think the disinformation game. I mean, what we are seeing in the United States, this is the amateur league. The big league is of course back in Ukraine. What is your sense? How do you convince audiences of value of quality news?
Well, it's not just disinformation that we are challenged with. It's also the fact that we live in an extremely overcrowded market. Because in Ukraine, we have a situation when media are basically PR units of oligarchs, and we have a very high ratio of media businesses per capita. In Poland, for example, which is a neighboring country, you have 14 media organizations per 1 million residents, and in Ukraine, or rather 4 per 1 million residents, and in Ukraine you have 14 per 1 million residents, and that's not counting websites. So we are in an extremely overpopulated environment, and the only way to differentiate yourself is actually to strive to tell the full story, to tell things as they are, because we are basically competing against very bright, very professionally made, very rich TV channels or media organizations that are subsidized by oligarchs, that are essentially a part of their food chains. But when I say food chain, I mean typically the media organization will be loss-making, but it will be subsidized by the core business of the oligarch. And then the media organization will be used to promote some political interests, politicians or parties into power. And when those people get into power, they provide benefits for the core business of the oligarch. And this chain is extremely powerful. It's extremely lucrative for the media owner. So it's very, very tough to break. And it's a big challenge. So the only way you can do it, differentiate yourself, is actually to provide very up-to-date, very good quality news for the consumer. The good news for us was when 3 years ago or so, we started actually studying the audience and thinking, okay, so where are the lacunes in the market? What is there that other people are not doing, that we could actually, what kind of waves can we ride to be able to compete in this overcrowded environment? And we realized that actually plenty. There is plenty of hunger. Ukraine is undergoing a massive healthcare reform. People really, really want healthcare news and health-related news, and nobody is really giving it to them from the consumer perspective. Another thing is economy. Obviously, in any country of the world, people care about their well-being, their personal pockets. But at the same time, in Ukraine, people say, we don't understand anything that these talking heads are saying. You know, the laws that they approve in parliament, we have no idea what's going on and how they're going to affect our lives. Nobody's explaining that. So that's another huge, massive lacune where, you know, that you can actually fill. And we went kind of along this route, identifying the needs of the audience, the needs of the market, and trying to sort of jump at that opportunity. Another story, and it's I believe it's pretty true across the globe, is that the female audiences tend to be very underserved. And in Ukraine, that is certainly the case, and we are as guilty as anyone else. But also, you know, more news, more type of programming is needed to target those particular audiences who have their own interests, and they need to be taken care of. And I'm not talking of glossy magazines, obviously. I'm talking about real serious news about tailored to women. So I can go on, but basically that's our approach. That's how we kind of challenged it.
So it's really about building that relationship with the audiences on topics that are close to them. So one topic that was mentioned along the sides of this discussion, and I think, you know, it is the elephant in the room, is sort of social media. So in the US, digital advertising, is 65% of it goes to 5 companies. We all know very well who they are. And more importantly, I think a lot of the growth, almost 90% of the growth in digital advertising goes to those companies. But the relationship with social media is more complicated than that. It's also the way now that media companies distribute their product. It's the way to reach out to their audiences. So what are your thoughts? Partner, competitor, enemy? How do you see them in this?
Des enemy, how's that? Let me put it in context. And again, I've had quite a lot of conversation with friends on this. First of all, if I remember and I recall, if you look at the brick and mortar space and the e-commerce, if my memory is correct, Bain has put a study out a year ago or so. By 20 and 25 on a global scale, 78% of sales are going to be on the brick and mortar. So the majority of sales for retailer are still going to be on the brick and mortar. However, a big focus is being done only on the digital side. Funny thing is that when you look at who watch TV here, who still watch TV? Raise your hand. Okay. For those that watch TV, have you noticed, especially in Western Europe, how many advertisers on TV are pure player, pure technology player that are advertising either on TV or on traditional, outdoor, etc. So today, reality is that the pendulum has swung to one extreme, and we've been overly focused on the digital and on the social media, and we forgot that actually marketing and reaching consumer, you need to be multi-channel. You need to have physical, you need to have digital, you need to have touch point, you need to be at your sales, point of sales, etc. And people and companies are losing this. When you look at the media, the problem is that the pendulum has shifted so swiftly that a lot of the money is going on that. And the problem, is it a fair competition? It's not. It's unregulated and it's not fair. Today, you look at the area we operate in. We operate across the MENA region. If any content provider to get break-even point on average need to sell at $10 the CPM, the big digital player, the Google, the Facebook, and so on, are selling at $1. How can you compete? There are laws. In the old days, there were anti-dumping laws that existed. They are not here. Basically, infrastructure has been monetized for those players in major markets. So when they're entering other markets, they're selling at the last marginal unit. And the last marginal unit costs close to zero. And at close to zero, at $1, you're still making a profit. So it's completely unfair competition that is taking place. And the problem is that the more this takes place, the less it allows local players in any form of market to compete. Again, the key is not about banning anybody, because this is not how a market should work. But it's about putting healthy rule of competition. Because the day there is no more competition, all of a sudden, prices are going to go to the roof. And you're going to be, as consumer, taken on a ride. Today in the UAE, I work in a market that has no competition on the telecom part. I do pay an arm and a leg on my phone or on my internet connection. The same thing would not happen in an open and competitive market. So the same thing would need to happen, is have fair competition rules.
Very good. Thomas, you seem like you have some thoughts on this. How do you see the working with them?
Well, I think a lot of the publishers are still in, probably not here, but a lot of the others in the world are still kind of blaming Facebooks and Googles for all of their problems. And this is probably not very fair, because one thing that we have to admit is that in terms of advertisement, the Facebook and Google actually do have a much better product than we have as a newspaper. You know, so my newspaper is still selling the advertisement, but and for some advertisers, it's actually a good thing to advertise with us and not with Facebook. But in reality, there are some things that they are just much better at doing, and it's not just because the market is distorted. So I think as a society, we have a big problem with these big players, you know, and we have a lot of problems. They are not paying taxes. They are distorting the media market. A lot of other things. So as a society, as a whole, we have to think hard, and we will probably be regulating them, and we'll probably do a lot of different things to actually correct some bad externalities, I would say, that are coming from these companies. But it's not but we cannot blame them as any other company would be. We cannot blame them for having a better product and actually stealing some customers from us. We can only do what every other company in other last 300 years was doing. We just have to adapt. Like if we don't have a better product, we have to find something else. You know. So I think that's mainly the issue. I would say that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, that we know that the New York Times and the Post and like the big guys, they are actually showing that you can be successful against Facebook and so on. It's the problem of the 99% of the rest of us, which are not so smart and not so good sometimes, how we can actually follow them. And then the question of how society as a whole will understand the problems that the big tech is bringing and how the society can deal with it.
Katya?
Well, for us, social media initially was a great friend because that's where we started. We started as a YouTube channel, and we became very popular because we started at the time of the revolution in Ukraine. So everyone was really glued to the screen. They needed both information and the sense of presence in the streets when things were blowing up and you know, on fire in the middle of the capital of Ukraine. But we really have this love-hate relationship with social media because, well, and then it's 90% hate and 5% love, because the 5% is the part where they help us drive traffic to our own platforms, of which we have more now. And the hate part is that they are so unpredictable, unreliable. As it's already been mentioned, that they have an unfair advantage over us, we believe, in terms of advertising. It's also unfair that, you know, the moment the Facebook algorithms changed this year, when they deprioritized news content, everyone, not just us, saw their content, their traffic to the website kind of nosedive. And that was, you know, we felt it was very unfair because we actually spend a lot of time building up communities around our content and promoting the content that we believe is good for the people, as opposed to you know, what outlets that are designed for different reasons are doing. But it's no use complaining about the social media, because this is the reality of our lives, and we just have to deal with it. We have to basically continue reinventing ourselves, and that is the state of the media, not just in terms of social relationship with the social media, but elsewhere. And also, a lot of what they're doing and what's being done with their help should be pushing us towards a different type of thinking about our content. It bugs me, for example, that you know, big data associated with social media has been used to affect the outcomes of elections and disseminate content into communities. But it's not actually been used, as far as I know, to promote media content. But is this possible? Can somebody think up a model where that would be possible and would be helpful to the media? Can we actually ride this as a wave as well, and use the social media to our advantage? So that kind of thoughts.
It sounds like there is a need for some kind of formula to work together, some kind of partnership. Is it
I don't agree. I think that the basic in any market is fair competition. If you have, and you don't have fair competition, you're distorting the market. And if you're ready to let the market being distorted, you create monsters. And monsters that abuse monopolies and abuse position that is bad for the consumer. And again, I'm talking fair competition. You have Sherman Act in the US, you have a lot of antitrust laws in the US, you have anti-dumping laws that are applied. If you look, don't look any further, look what happened in France in the 80s. When France signed the WTO agreement at the time, there was conversation about the cultural exception. The issue was very simple. It's the same issues that we've been facing around the world with some of the global tech players. At the time, a movie studio in the US produced content. They produce more content than any country around the world, or most of the countries around the world combined time two. Selling an hour of TV programming doesn't cost them money, because it's the marginal cost. It's the cost of the tape and shipping the tape. So for $1,000, you can send an hour of good programming and sell it in any country around the world. However, this is dumping. This is dumping, and it will destroy the local content producer, the TV producer, the movie producer. And at the time, what France did, they signed an agreement which was l'exception culturelle, and the idea of it was very simple. Let's protect our industry, let's allow them to nurture, to grow, to become competitive, and then to be able to compete. And this allowed the local production to grow, because at the end of the day, and I remind it every time that I speak with people, I tell them, you want to eat your hummus with pita bread, you want to eat your cheese with baguette, and the baguette is produced locally and the pita bread is produced locally. This needs to be local content. It needs to be close, but you need to allow your own ecosystem to have the weapon to defend itself. If you just open to the big boy, you're allowing the market to be bullied. And this is the thing. It's again, it's fair competition with rule of law that are applied.
Okay, I think we're getting the nod for that we are closing. Certainly, I think this is an important discussion, which is not going anywhere in the sense of it will come back and back until we find some kind of solution. People still continue to need quality media, and some form of working together will need to be found. I think that we will close now, but thank you very much for listening, and thank you for such a great event, and thank you for coming here.